Are you concerned about all this corruption being misgendered as conspiracies? Well, don't you worry. Sit back, relax, and join in the conversation as we talk with today's guest. Welcome to another LSB Film Productions podcast with your host, Chris Brooks.
Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I have a great guest. I have Alan Briggs, who is going to talk to us all about the Baron David Ward.
That's right.
Affidavit. It's been a long morning, believe it or not. And is also going to discuss with us the MP lean process, which obviously goes hand in hand with the affidavit. So welcome to the channel, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
You're more than welcome. So let's dig in.
Right. Can I share my screen?
You can.
Let's have a look. So it's an introduction to the Baron David Ward affidavit and the lien process. You can see there that there are two websites, bdwaffidavit.weebly.com and bdwfax.com. I only came into this, learned about it in either late 2021 or early 2022. And I found that there's a lot of information out there, but it's spread about quite a lot. They do a lot on, they've got a number of groups on Facebook and things, but Facebook isn't necessarily the best place for, storing information. So that bdwaffidavit.weebly.com is basically this website. So this is the one I've put together. And you can see you can download the affidavit. Yeah, that's it. You can download the affidavit. You can download resources and frequently asked questions. You can download 2023 email list. Obviously, that's going to be need updating after the election.
Yeah.
There's links to the video that you put together after I wrote to you a little while back that you put that cartoon on.
Yeah.
Some other things, some talks. There's two very good talks here about, this one's about the affidavit and this one's about the MP lien process. There's newbie resources. There's how-tos with Baron David Ward. There's links to all these audio files, which this was a Zoom call, I believe it was, where a lady read the whole affidavit, and Baron David Ward was on the call. So he explained why he'd done certain things. So you get, if you listen to them as well as reading the affidavit, you get more information from that because it gives you a bit more understanding.
Okay.
These
Mr. Vobes.
Yeah, these videos here are what I tell people to go to from my talk. Obviously, if you try to do a talk in an hour, 2 hours, you can't cover everything. It's just a quick overview. So I point them in the directions for Exhibit A to go to look at 12 presumptions of law on Richard Vobes. On this one's for Exhibit B. And the guy from the observation takes an hour just to go through Exhibit B, explaining it in minute detail as to how it works and all the fraud and everything that's going on. These are Facebook groups that you can join, YouTube channel, and then there's some more information. There's also the BDW Fax website, which has got other information, but it doesn't bring everything together like the other site does.
Okay. Well, I will put all these links in the video description.
Yeah, I did send you.
Yeah, I saw.
Last email, I give you the links. So basically, I've shared this. Well, first of all, I'm not an expert. Even the admins who run the Facebook groups, they say they're not experts. They know a lot more than I do. So obviously, I'm not giving advice or making any claims. All I'm doing is sharing my understanding of the affidavit and the lien process. People do need to do their own research, and the easiest way to do that is download the affidavit and read it. You might need to read it a few times. It is quite a read, but if you listen to the audio files, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
And I only said, this is an introduction. It's not an excuse not to read it. I've shared it with a lot of people and on groups and everything. And one of the comments I got back was, oh, you don't take any notice of the barons. They're part of the deception. Well, Baron David Ward did a lot of research on what a baron is. And I've just pulled some of the important pieces out and put it on 2 slides here. So he asked the question is, what is a baron? Is there a difference between a hereditary title baron and a real baron by natural descent? And is there any subversion where a titled baron is less in status than a real baron? He went to look at what it means to give an oath. So it says it's correct to observe that he who gives an oath is in service to the oath. Otherwise, there'd be no point in taking that oath. There are many types of oaths: oath of allegiance, an oath of service, so military. Some US citizens swear an oath of allegiance to a flag, which puts them in service to that flag and a constitution that they never signed.
Exactly. Even the word citizens is a legalese word, isn't it?
Exactly. So kings and queens swear an oath at their coronation. So that means a king or a queen is a servant. They're a servant to that oath and a servant to the people who they've sworn the oath to. And anybody else who swears an oath to that king or queen is by definition a servant of a servant. So no servant can create laws because they're servants. And in 1957, the Queen said, I do not give you laws or administer justice. She couldn't. And neither can Charlie Boy. They're servants. So David then went on to track the etymology of the word baron through 6 or 7 languages and back to Latin. And he found that the English for the word baron was barrowman. So then he looked and tried to find what is a barrowman. But all he could find was what a barrowman was not. And he found that a barrowman is not in service. So any service, military, anything, police, whatever. A barrowman is not a paid servant to another. A barrowman is not indentured to another by agreement, so an apprentice. A barrowman is not in service by way of an oath, so king or queen. A barrowman is not a slave, and a barrowman has no master. And so he took all that and came to the conclusion that a baron, or barrowman, or a baron by natural descent is the highest status on the planet because they're not in service, they don't answer to anybody else. And then he looked and qualified that by looking at the barons of 1215. So if they'd been given their title by the king, and then they went and challenged the king and said, you've been a bit naughty here, so if you don't sign this charter, we're going to get shut here, they would have lost their heads. But they didn't, because they were natural born barons, and the king was a servant to those barons. So that's why Baron David Ward calls himself a baron, because he's a natural born baron, and we're all born barons or baronesses.
So it's basically another word for like your sovereign state. You're an inalienable standing.
Well, with anybody that uses the Baron David Ward affidavit, don't talk about anything like that.
No?
Because the affidavit puts everything else, blows it all out to the water.
Right, okay.
So the next thing we just need to look at is what is an affidavit and why is it so powerful? Well, if you look in the dictionaries, this one's from the Cambridge Dictionary, it's a written statement that somebody makes after promising officially to tell the truth. So it's got to be written on paper. You need to sign it or put your seal on it. So what makes that so powerful? To find out why it's so powerful, we need to look at maxims. So a maxim, I'm sure some of your viewers will already know, is a broad statement of principle, the truth and reasonableness of which are self-evident. Now, maxims are sometimes called maxims in fact or maxims in law. And basically, they've been agreed on for generations, hundreds of years, and they're used by the judiciary and courts, and they can't be argued against. So there are 2 maxims there that I've just pulled out relating to what an affidavit is. The first one there says, an unrebutted affidavit stands as the truth and fact. And the second one is, he who does not rebut the affidavit agrees to it by default. So basically, an affidavit, you write down what you believe to be the truth and back it up with evidence, and then you serve it on whoever you're serving it. So in Baron David Ward's case, he served it on all 657 MPs in office in 2015. And he gave them 28 days to rebut it. So rebut means to challenge, but they couldn't turn around and say, oh, that's not the case. They have to rebut it personally with evidence to back up what they're saying, and that's which is proving your statement's wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, you would think that with all the legal brains that the government has at their disposal, it would have been very easy for them to give it to one of those and say, we've had this affidavit sent, rebut it for us so we can all send the rebuttals. That didn't happen because it can't be rebutted. And you'll understand that as we go through it. So because they couldn't rebut it, ignoring it doesn't make it go away, because he who does not rebut the affidavit agrees to it by default. And that is why the affidavit is certainly one of, if not the most powerful legal document there is. If you ignore it, you agree to it. And that's actually something that they've used against us for generations, you know, where they say something, do something, maybe, well, our attention's taken by Partygate or something like this, and then they put something out, nobody says anything about it, against it, so they say, oh, well, you've agreed to it, so we're going to do it anyway. So that is the power of the affidavit. So Baron David Ward's affidavit is a 65 pages outlining the fraud, malfeasance and terrorism that takes place every day and has done for the past 800 years and more. It took him between 10 and 12 years to research, and he served it on all the MPs on the 20th day of March in 2015. He gave them 28 days to rebut it on a point-for-point basis, and to this day, not one rebuttal has been forthcoming. Since that time, I suspect that certainly most, if not all, MPs that have served since have had the affidavit served to them by somebody. I served them all in September of 2022, and to this day, I've had not one rebuttal. So they've all agreed to it as being the facts. Okay. So basically, if there's no disagreement, there can only be agreement.
And has that worked out in your life at the moment with regards to that, like the benefits of doing this?
Well, it's a numbers game. When David Ward started this, there's around about 67.5 million people in the UK. When David Ward served this, that was one out of 67.5 million. So they could ignore it and forget all about it. But today, especially after the last few years, there are more and more people serving the affidavit to the MPs. But not only that, they're using the lien process to hold these fraudsters to account. So if we, now I'm only going to very briefly touch on each of these, and I'll point out when it's, you know, there's the videos to go and look at to give you more information. But the first 2 pages are not part of the affidavit. They're a decree. And basically, by putting the decree on there, David made it public and he shared it to the public. And what that did, it allowed every one of us to use his affidavit. We don't need to change anything in it whatsoever. We can just send it to the MPs. And because they've already agreed to it, we only have to give them 48 hours to rebut it. And they won't, because they can't. So by doing that, he gave us all a fantastic gift and left a fantastic legacy. So the affidavit itself consists of a few pages, which are all numbered points. The first 4 are where it says, you know, Baron David of the House of Ward, being the undersigned, solemnly swear and declare that he's competent to swear that what is saying in this is true and everything. And then after that, so from 5 onwards, All it is really is a summary of all the exhibits. So if we go and just start to look at the exhibits, Exhibit A is the formal challenge to the 12 presumptions of law. Now, this is where you can, Richard Vobes has done a good video, lasts about 20 minutes, on the 12 presumptions of law. There are a few others, some last longer. There's another good one by two gentlemen. I think that lasts about an hour. He goes into a bit more detail. But if you search 12 presumptions of law on YouTube, you'll find some videos. I've just taken a couple of points. So he starts off by saying, what is a presumption? So the definition of a presumption is an idea that is taken to be true on the basis of probability. Then he goes on to say, as a presumption is a presumption which must be agreed by the parties to be true, then and equally, if one party challenges the presumption to be true on the basis of probability, then this is all that is recognised to be required to remove the presumption, is a formal challenge to that presumption. The presumption then has no standing or merit in fact. So then he went on to look at probability. So the definition of that is the extent to which something is probable and the likelihood of something happening or being the case. So again, by definition, then this is not substantive, as it is only a probability, and what may be, and therefore has no substance in fact. Substantive basically means it's got substance. So state court does not operate according to any true rule of law, but by presumptions of the law. Therefore, if presumptions presented by the private bar guild are not rebutted, they become fact and are therefore said to stand true. So there are 12 presumptions that David pulled out. I've just made a few notes here. I'm not going to go through them all. But public record. Well, everything to do with the judiciary is from the private bar guild. It's private. It's not public. It's private. Any public oath, the judging people are supposed to take an oath to serve the people. But judges, solicitors, barristers take an oath to the private bar guild. And they put that oath above any other oath. In other words, they have a conflict of interest and therefore cannot sit in judgment over anybody because they have a conflict of interest to put the matters of the private bar guild before you. And whether you're fighting somebody else or whatever. The presumption of immunity, they presume that they're immune. No matter what they do, they are immune from prosecution. And if we don't challenge that, then it stands as true. There's a good one near the bottom, at the bottom there, the presumption of guilt. So we're always taught that in this country, we're innocent until proven guilty. But actually, under the private bar guild, you are presumed to be guilty and you have to prove your innocence. Again, it's just a conflict of interest. So nobody in the Baron David Ward affidavit who's running this ever goes to court, because a court is a building. The true court, a court of record, is the paperwork. I'm sure a lot of your viewers will know this. And the paperwork is the affidavit and the lien process. So if we move on to Exhibit B, which is case authority. So this is where Baron David Ward got a parking charge notice from Warrington Borough Council. He parked in a disabled bay without realising it. And then as he was going back to his car, he noticed a parking traffic warden. He said he went up to him shouting and bawling, and then realised that he'd signed it. So he just said, "Oh, give me the ticket." And so what he did, oh, and by the way, there's a video, the video I talked about earlier on observation deck. Mm-hmm. Now, he takes an hour to go through this. So obviously we don't have an hour. But
we have got until about 2:30 cut-off point.
Yeah,
I've got to go and get
I know it still takes nearly 2 hours.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I am rushing a bit as well today. So, but basically, Mr. David Ward, so not David Ward the man, but Mr. David Ward, the principal legal embodiment, challenged the parking charge, didn't charge the parking charge notice, he challenged the entire system. So, say we're not going to go through it all, but basically he wrote back to them challenging the system. They wrote back saying, we're not having any of that, you've got to pay it, backwards and forwards, until eventually they wrote back to him and said, well, we're not going to get an agreement, so your next step is you can go to adjudication, which is what he wanted. So what he did then, he wrote a letter to the adjudicator and put all the facts. And basically, he backed the adjudicator into a corner where he had nowhere to go apart from come down on David's side. And he got a letter from the adjudicator through the post, which stated the appellant is not liable to pay the outstanding penalty charge. Now, he was extremely annoyed at this point because the adjudicator failed to sign it. However, the very next day in the post, he got a letter from Scott Clark at Warrington Borough Council, again saying that he had no need to pay. They weren't taking it any further, and that one was signed. So that actual letter brings their whole system tumbling down because he doesn't have to pay a parking charge notice because it doesn't apply to him. So, and
which
it was
I guess it's the same thing with me in the DVLA then. Once that will...
Yeah, nothing applies. Yeah.
No.
I mean, in the affidavit, we're using the affidavit and the lien process. People do use liens on the CEO of the DVLA and things because they're acting in committing fraud, malfeasance in the office, and willful and belligerent acts of terrorism. Yeah. Anybody acting for the corporation masquerading as government, whether it be the government, local government, police, judiciary, they're all committing fraud, malfeasance in the office, and willful and belligerent acts of terrorism. Some people say, oh, that's a big word, strong word, terrorism.
I'm glad I left the council then.
Well, the thing is, they've made us believe that a terrorist is somebody that runs around with a
on his back,
a vest on it. Yeah. Where if you look at the definition of a terrorist, it's somebody who uses force to get their way.
Yeah.
Especially in politics. So, Exhibit C, material evidence of the facts. Now, this is an important. I've only pulled out little bits of it, but on the 16th of April in 2008, at the Nottingham Trent University, the Honourable Sir Jack Beatson, FBA, spoke the following words. Now, he did a long speech, and when David read this speech, he read it and thought, well, that's a load of nonsense. So he read it again, read it a few times. And basically, they'd done what they always do. They put out a load of nonsense, but somewhere in that nonsense, they tell you what they want, that they don't want you to know, but they've hidden it in plain sight. And the paragraph that they didn't want people to pick out was this one. The 2003 changes and the new responsibilities given to the Lord Chief Justice necessitates a certain amount of re-examination of the relationship between the judiciary and the two stronger branches of the state, the executive and the legislature. Now, as David Ward said, Jack Beatson didn't just say that. He must have been told to say that and hide it in this nonsense. Because up until then, for the previous 800 years, the judiciary was outside the government. It was there to keep the government in check when they get like they are today and acting tyrannically. It was in 2003, and it was when Blair was Prime Minister. He brought the judiciary into the government, but not only into it, he brought it the third level down. So there's the executive, there's the legislature, and then there's the judiciary. So the judiciary cannot find against its bosses, which are the legislature and the executive. So basically, it's got no teeth to hold the government to account. So that's one thing that was, hidden in plain sight. The other thing is, what is a state? Now, Chandran Kakuthas in 2014, he made a speech at the London School of Economics. He defined what a state was. Now, he took 7 pages to define what a state was. And after reading it many times, Baron David Ward pulled out some of these points, and I'll read them to you. So basically, the state should not be viewed as a form of association that subsumes or subordinates all others. The state is not an entity whose interests map closely onto the interests of the groups and individuals that fall under its authority, but has interests of its own. The state is, to some extent at least, an alien power. Though it is of human construction, it is not within human control. The state is not there to secure people's deepest interests, and it does not serve to unify them, reconcile them with one another, bring their competing interests into harmony, or realize any important good, such as justice, freedom, or peace. While its power might be harnessed from time to time, that will serve the interests of some, not the interests of all. The state is thus an institution through which individuals and groups seek to exercise power, though it is not the only such institution, but it is also an institution that exercises power over individuals and groups. The state is ultimately an abstraction, for it has no existence as a material object, is not confined to a particular space, and is not embedded in any person or collection of persons. Also, the question is now, what does it mean to say that a state is a corporate entity? The state is a corporation in the way that a people or a public cannot be. A number of things are clear from the definition of a state from the London School of Economics. A state is a corporate entity by an act of registration, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail in a second. It's a legal embodiment by an act of registration. A state has no obligations to anything other than the state, and to the exclusion of anything and anybody else. And a state is nothing of material substance, but only a construct of the mind. And this is, if it's just in the mind, if it exists just on paper, it's not material. We are material. We're living beings. Anything that's just on paper, it's not material. It's not material. So, in other words, a state is no different to McDonald's or Tesco, and as such, legislation, acts, and statutes are nothing more than company policy. And company policy only applies to those who work for the company. And then, if we go on and look at this diagram that he put together, you can see here across the look at McDonald's. So start at this right hand side. McDonald's was created, the principal legal embodiment is McDonald's, and it was created through an act of registration, registering it as a business. So under McDonald's, the company, we've got an office of the executive, got a CEO, chief executive officer. There's company policy, the rules that the employees have to abide by. There's company policy enforcement offices, and then it carries on down depending what company it is, how big it is. So the company policy only applies to those who work for the company. Stands to reason.
Yeah.
I don't work for McDonald's, so their policy doesn't apply to me. If we then look at HM Parliament and Government PLC, now many years ago, the government, through an act of registration, became a for-profit corporation, HM Parliament and Government PLC, which is the principal legal embodiment, just the same as McDonald's. It has an office of the executive. It has a CEO, the Prime Minister. It has the legislature. If you remember, we talked earlier, the executive, the legislature, and now it's got the office of the judiciary, the third office down. Then the Lord Chief Justice, the QCs and judges, the circuit judges, etc., and the police are all below that. So, because it's a principal legal embodiment created by an act of registration, nothing more than McDonald's. It's exactly equal to McDonald's, Tesco, Amazon. And its policy, its company policy, only applies to the people who work for the company. If you don't work for the company, acts and statutes do not apply to you. But we've been lied to and we've been defrauded because they commit fraud by omitting to tell us that acts and statutes do not apply to you if you don't work for the company. If we then come to the left-hand side, any other legal person that's created by the same process. So the birth certificate, as a lot of people say, was used to create, by an act of registration as the birth certificate, the principal legal embodiment, which is the all caps name, or the straw man, is whatever you want to call it. So the all caps name, the principal legal embodiment, your name in all capitals with a title or without a title, is the highest authority within this legal system. We are equal to HM Parliament and Government PLC, which is equal to McDonald's. And there's nothing under where we are, because that's us. We are everything. We're our own Attorney General. We have our own power of attorney. So it's all about that. We are the principal legal embodiment. Anybody who works for HM Parliament and Government PLC is acting under that. So therefore, they are beneath us. The office of the executive is beneath us. The Prime Minister, all the MPs, they're all beneath us. The judges are beneath us. They cannot judge us. We are above them. But obviously, this has been hidden from us for generations.
It's like when we ask, you're asking, it's as king.
Yeah, as king.
As king.
Yeah. So the next exhibit we're going to look at is Exhibit D, which is the Companies Act 2006, Section 44, Execution of Documents. So anything that is, if they're coming at you for whatever, it's got to be executed under this act, right? Now, this is their acts, right? So David Ward was saying, look, these are your acts, and you're committing fraud because you're not following them. So, under Section 44, Execution of Documents, under the law of England and Wales and Northern Ireland, a document is executed by a company, A, by the affixing of its common seal, or by signature in accordance with the following provisions. 2, a document is validly executed by a company if it is signed on behalf of the company, A, by 2 authorised signatories, or B, by a director of the company in the presence of a witness who attests the signature. And then 4, a document signed in accordance with subsection 2 and expressed in whatever words to be executed by the company has the same effect as if executed under the common seal of the company. So, if anybody is challenging you to say you owe them money, number one, they can't demand money unless you've got a contract. Under the bills of exchange, they can only send you a true bill if you have a contract, and that contract must be on paper, must have all the things of a contract, so full disclosure, everything. It must be signed in wet ink by 2 or more people, or it must have the common seal of the company. They don't do this. They send you a parking charge notice or a speeding notice. Where's the signature? It's not signed. Therefore, it's non-legal. And if it's non-legal, it's illegal. So anything that they send you, even send you a bill for water, electricity, gas, where's the signature? Who is taking responsibility? Nobody is, because they know they're committing fraud. They can't send you a true bill because you don't have a contract. All you have is a service agreement. So a contract must be signed by 2 or more people. Anything that's not signed is just, like gas, water. All you've got is a service agreement. A warrant must be signed by a judge in wet ink. I don't know whether you watch any of the videos where bailiffs are turning up and the police are backing them up and the people are asking to see the warrant and they get a tablet out.
I've just put a video up actually of that.
Yeah, how can you sign a tablet in wet ink? It's impossible. A tablet is fraud, So more and more people are waking up, thank goodness. So they are committing fraud under their own rules. Exhibit E, the insanity of tax. Again, there's a video on divergent motivation. Basically, David Ward wrote a story about a loaf of bread on Morrison's shelf. It's fairly long, but just to give you a gist of it, he says, John the farmer he bought the seed to sow for getting the wheat, for making the bread. But wait a minute, he bought the seed, but he had to pay tax at whatever percentage. I know he pays council tax on his little, farm, and he wants to get the tractors fired up. But wait a minute, he paid tax on the diesel, and then when it's all grown, he wants to, cut it all down. But again, he's paid for diesel, he's paid tax on that. Then the guy is going to come and take it away to the storage place. Well, he's paid tax on his diesel and he's paid tax on where he lives, and he pays tax on everything. And it basically goes through the whole process of how he gets from the seed onto Morrison's shelf and how everything pays tax. And he got 2 chartered accountants to look at this, and this is back in 2015. It's gone up now, but they worked out that the tax on a loaf of bread was 85%. It's now been recalculated, and it's now with all the new taxes that's come out since then, they now say that we're paying 92% of what we earn in tax. So basically, it is. So what basically it means is in 2015, a £20,000 car would have cost you £3,000. A £100,000 house would have cost you £15,000. And I just actually read a very good thing about the tax on one of the groups today. If I remember later on, I'll send you a copy of it.
Okay.
Again, it's explaining just the absurdity of tax. And like he says, we pay tax. So people will say, well, yes, but you've got to pay tax for police and for this and that and the other.
Never used to.
Why if we're paying for the police, why are the police paying tax? Where does that go? If we're paying tax for the teachers, why are they paying tax? Because where does that go? It all goes into a tax black hole to make all the billionaires we've got around today. That's fun,
your national insurance number is actually a government bank account.
Yeah, so they say. So Exhibit F, nobody gets paid. So again, on divergent motivation, Carla, who runs that, she's done a good video. But again, basically, between 1919 and 1925, a cooperative and a successful effort was made to replace the monetary systems of the world upon the firm foundation, and the international gold standard was restored. In the last few years, a variety of circumstances have combined to imperil this work of restoration. The collapse of the gold standard in a number of raw material producing countries in the 1930s was followed by the suspension of the gold standard in a number of European countries in 1931. And a lot of countries were driven off the gold standard. In fact, which Prime Minister was it now? Oh, his name just... But basically, Heath, they sold off certainly a lot of the gold. again, all stolen and sold off. Where did that money go? So basically, there's no such thing as money. All you've got is a piece of paper with squiggles on it that says, I promise to pay the bearer. It's all debt. It's very strange as well, because David did a lot of research. It's very strange that there's no record of the Gold Standard Amendment Bill on the UK government website. But when he searched on Google, he found 36,600 results for it. So why have they taken that off the Gold Standard, the UK legislation website? Very strange. So basically, money does not exist. And if you were to take a £20 note to the Bank of England and say, I'd like me £20 of whatever it is you're going to give me, you'd be shown the door and they'd lock the doors after you. And it all went on to fractional lending, which I presume a lot of your viewers know, and you know that basically banks can lend out more or less as much as they want.
10 times for every pound they can.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if that's changed now. But basically, if you take out a loan, whether it's a mortgage or a loan, the bank lends you absolutely nothing. Your signature on the piece of paper creates a promissory note, as far as I understand it. Mm-hmm. Once you've signed that, it's bought your house. However, the banks don't like that. So they tell you that they're going to lend you that, even though you've created it. And they tell you they want it back, and they tell you they want interest on it.
Does this money come out of your trust? So every time you do take a mortgage out, is that your money to start with? No?
Not that I'm aware of. It's through this fractional lending. It's just created out of thin air.
Okay.
I'm not an expert, but all this was put in the affidavit to all the MPs, and not one of them rebutted any point of it. So it is the truth. The MPs have all agreed it's the truth. So a banknote's a promise. It's a promise to pay, nothing else. It's issued by a private business. So how many people are aware that the Bank of England is not the Bank of England? It's a private for-profit bank that's just called itself the Bank of England. So the people think, oh, it's the Bank of England. Nothing to do with England. It's a private business. So money's backed by nothing.
Much like the Federal Reserve is nothing to do with.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all fraud. It's all fraud. The reason it's fraud is because we were never told. You can commit fraud by omitting to tell somebody something that you should have told them. Yeah. And we should have been told from day one that this is not the Bank of England. It's a for-profit company, which we are calling the Bank of England. But they never did that. They deliberately led us all to believe that it's the Bank of England. It's the American Federal Reserve, etc. So basically, all money is confidence, faith, and belief. And I think a lot of your viewers probably know that the fiat currency that we have at the minute is getting to breaking point, and at some point they will collapse it. I'm sure they will.
They have to.
So what's going to happen?
There's no way that they could pay back this debt, because there's more debt than there is money.
Well, the thing is, there is no debt because there is no money. We're all just, it's confidence, faith, and belief that I give you this £20 note. You've got confidence that you can take that to a shop and buy £20 worth of stuff with it. Mm. But when they're ready and they want to collapse everything, then that's what they'll do. And then they'll say, right, you've got to sign up for our central bank digital currency, which is a programmable currency. And me, like David Ward, I used to be a programmer. And it's very easy to program that currency to say, if you go out of your 15-minute city, your little card or chip in your hand or whatever won't work. You won't be able to buy it.
Mark of the beast. And that's honestly that's why I honestly think that they invented Bitcoin, because it's like the precursors to the CBDCs, isn't it?
Yeah, I've heard different things.
To get people used to it.
Yeah. So basically, the banks are all committing fraud every single day. And the only person that I know that's actually taken a bank to court and won, the Royal Bank of Scotland, was Michael Obanisia, which is doing his own thing. And I've got nothing against anybody doing whatever they're doing. So, yeah, he proved that all the banks are committing fraud. So Exhibit G, an Englishman's home is his castle. Funkstar Darrell, it's only thing he's done a good video on castle doctrine. But basically, this is castle doctrine. And again, for hundreds of years, this has stood. It's not a law as such, it's stood. And it's agreement, everybody agrees to it, that we are allowed to defend our castle. And our castle is not just our home, but it's our bodies, because this is our castle, this is us. It's our property, our cars. We can defend it. We can defend our family. And they've obviously tried to remove this information, but we can use up to and including deadly force. And people have done, and they haven't been prosecuted for it because it's been justifiable homicide.
Didn't we have? Haven't we also got the right to bear arms as well?
Yes, yeah. Again, it's only the legal system that you haven't. Basically, you are the highest authority. You are born free, and you are free. Acts or statutes, unless you work for the corporation, do not apply to you. You can bear arms. Yeah. Now, the only thing is, these evil people don't tell the police this. They tell the police, everybody has to abide by this. So, I mean, to me, when Cameron was in and we had austerity, which, let's face it, was a joke because there's no such thing as money. There was no toxic debt because they didn't lend anything. He got rid of how many police? Got rid of loads and loads of police. Now, I think that was part of the plan. He was getting rid of the older style police that knew a bit more. And then when
like your common law constables and things like that.
Yeah, when Johnson came in, he took a load of police on. And then I believe that they've all been trained in the deception of what we have today. And you've only got to look at the videos that are circulating on YouTube about how the police are so out of control.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely disgusting.
They're corporate whores, aren't they?
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
So the hypocrisy of the secret ballot elective process. So again, election, people have been led to believe that you go into a little box and you're given a piece of paper with some words on it and some squares. I mean, I haven't voted for a long time, but it used to be that you had a pencil on a piece of string and you put an X where you wanted it. So if you look back at history, the only people that sign the name with an X is illiterate people. Yeah. You can't write.
Which I only recently discovered that when a bank says, right, sign here, sign here, sign here with the X's, that's their signature.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, which is why they do it with an X. Sign there, sign there. They're actually signing it with you.
But it's obviously they're not illiterate, so they can't get away with that. It's fraud because they haven't, unless a living man or woman puts their name to the document, it's fraud. So if we look at the secret ballot, you're told to put an X. So when you think about it, the only people that's ever voted are Mr. and Mrs. X. Nobody else has ever voted. There's been no contract. You by putting an X on a piece of paper with some writing on it is not a contract. There's no way you're signing any consent to be governed. So, and the fact that it's secret, in order for something to have material evidence, material fact, we should be able to go to the government or to your MP and say, how many votes did you get? Right, please show me those votes and who voted for you. But you can't, it's impossible because it's all fraud. Plus, there's no unelection process. So whenever you sign a contract, if you've looked at that contract properly, there will be a way of getting out of the contract. Yeah, you might have to pay a bit to get out or whatever, but there's usually a way to get out of the contract. There's no unelection process. That in itself, to me, is fraud.
And
So
also the signature's public, isn't it? And the autograph's private, is that right?
well, people who use the affidavit, they don't sign. As we talk about the liens, I'll show you what we actually do. We also have a seal, so we can emboss paperwork.
Okay.
But the difference between a company seal and a baron's seal is that a company seal is a common seal, and a baron's seal is a great seal.
Okay.
So if we look, to validate election process. So there's no unelection process, which there should be. Only Mr. and Mrs. X have ever voted. So there's no accountability. Why should it be a secret ballot? It's only a secret ballot because they don't want you to know what's going on. They don't want you to know if your vote's been counted or anything. Why else would it need to be secret? They say, oh, well, you don't want people knowing that you voted for this party. Oh, they might gang up on you if they voted on another party. Nothing to do with that. Just using your fear against you.
Yeah.
No elected official in public office can present any material evidence to the fact that they have even been elected. There is no public office, as the office is the office of a private company. Again, if you see Exhibit C, it's a private company. It's not a public company, it's a private company, so there can be no public office. The private policy of a private government company carries no authority or legal obligation under the private company government's legal definition of statute, where there is a requirement for the legal consent of the governed. There is no legal obligation for the elected to act upon the wishes of the people, and there's no accountability. So that one there is no legal obligation for the elected to act upon the wishes of the people. Now, that is totally evident today because it's supposed to be, we elect who we want to represent us. We tell them what we want. They go down to the parliament, tell them, and then the government do what we want.
That's what I say. We live in an inverted world where I've said this so many times. Yeah,
exactly.
So the powers of the people, who then delegate what they want to the councils, and the councils then go to the government and say, right, this is what the people want.
Yep.
Make it happen. Well,
Correct.
we're all led to believe it's top down.
Yep. And this is part of the fraud. And it is fraud because were we told that the people you elect are not working in public office, they're working in a private office of a private company? No, that's fraud by misrepresentation.
Yeah.
There is no legal obligation for the elected to act upon the wishes of the people. Were we told that they had no legal obligation to do what we voted them in to do? No, we weren't. I mean, it's been seen for certainly in my lifetime, I've seen it, but I never knew this. And the office of the judiciary is a sub-office of a private company, and therefore, even if you try and take them to court, the judges won't rule against their bosses. So it's just a total nonsense. And people talk about democracy. Well, basically, democracy is mob rule. Because if you've got 100 people and 52 want to do it this way, 48 want to do it a different way, then if you make the 48 want to do it a different way, make it do it your way, that's mob rule. It's not democracy, it's mob rule.
No, it's not. I'm pretty sure democracy in Latin is probably something completely the opposite to what we think
probably,
is.
So do we have an elected government by the people, for the people, where this government has responsibility and accountability to the people? And the answer to that is no, we do not. End of story. But luckily, more and more people are starting to wake up. So that gets us actually to the end of the affidavit, as much as I've got time to tell you. Mm-hmm. So what people should do is they should read the affidavit, read it a number of times. It is a long document. I can just show you it.
A long document, but it will save you hours upon hours on your life.
Yeah. If I bring this over here. So this is the affidavit. So now I first came across it either late 21 or early 22. And when I first opened it and scrolled through like this, I thought, oh, I don't have time to read that just yet, because I was doing other research and obviously other commitments. But in early 22, I did actually get the time to print it off and read it. So these are just all the exhibits. And so when I read it through once and I thought, wow, this is very promising, but I need to do more research, which is what I did. And so I researched it. I read it through quite a number of times. I listened to those audio files because David Ward keeps giving extra information, why he did certain things, what certain things mean, helps you to understand it. And I think anybody who's got any free thinking left after all the propaganda that we've been bombarded with, if you just take the time to read it and understand it, you'll see it all makes complete sense. And the fact that it's never been rebutted shows that it is the truth. It's been agreed by, if not all, but certainly the vast majority of MPs since 2015. So what we do now, once you've read it and understand it, we serve the MPs. Now, there's two ways of serving the MPs. The first one is to use the affidavit as it is. Because he put that decree on the front and made it public, we can use it as it is. We don't have to do anything with it. All we need to do is write an email. We send it. We usually use, they recommend Google because you can send up to 50 emails at once. I think you can do that in other emails things now. But because you can do up to 50 at once, somebody's gone and got all the MP email address and put them in blocks of 50 or just short of 50, 47, something like that. And so this is the email. So what we do is, we'll just come back here. So we put them all in an email, we attach it to the email, we send it, we give them 48 hours to rebut it. If after 48 hours they haven't rebutted it, they've agreed to it. Because they've already agreed to David's, we only need to give them 48 hours. There is a longer process, which some people do, but I personally don't see the point in reinventing the wheel. And that is to make it your own. Obviously, it's more complicated and takes longer because you have to go through the whole affidavit and everything relating to David Ward, you have to change to yourself. Yeah. Then you have to add it, attach it to an email. You have to send it to the MPs. But now, because it's a new affidavit, you have to wait 28 days for them to rebut it. So I would recommend to everybody, just do it this way. And this is just an example of one of the emails that people use. In the subject field, they'll put, for your urgent attention, limited time applies, 48 hours. Dear Sir, Madam, I would like to note here that it is irrelevant which constituency I am from, and this will not be accepted as a valid response. So for anybody who's written to MPs, they always want to know your address in case you're not in their constituency, because under their rules that only apply to them, they're not allowed to reply to anybody if they're not in their constituency. But hey, that's up to them. If they want to ignore reading this and look at what's come to them, and they ignore it, then by ignoring it, they're agreeing to it. End of story. So this email is delivered to you in your email address directly and needs to be dealt with accordingly. The reason that is because an affidavit can only be rebutted by the individual who it was sent to, and they have to do it with an affidavit of their own. They can't turn around and say, oh no, it's a load of rubbish. They've got to say, well, point A is wrong because, and here's the evidence. Point B is wrong because, and here's the evidence. Obviously, that's never happened and never will. And it says, please find attached the Baron David Ward affidavit of truth and statement of fact. This affidavit was sent to 657 MPs in 2015 and has remained unrebutted ever since. You now have 48 hours to rebut the affidavit point for point. Once the 48 hours have expired, there is a formal agreement between the parties as to what the facts are. This is why the affidavit is a most powerful legal tool. If unrebutted after 48 hours, there's a legal and binding agreement between the parties that can no longer be disputed. There can't be any further argument after 48 hours. An unrebutted affidavit is a formal contract. Silence gives consent. Silence grants a tacit and binding agreement through acquiescence without ill will or vexation. And then if you look down here at the bottom left-hand side, this is how barons sign off their documents. For and on behalf of the principal legal embodiment by the title of Mr. Fred Bloggs in this instance. So we as the living man are acting for the legal embodiment. We are not the legal embodiment. That only exists on paper.
Well, the persona is the mask, isn't it? So when you these old parties where they'd walk around with the masks, that was known as a persona.
Yeah.
So that's what you speak through. That's what your embodiment of Mr. Fred Bloggs is.
Yeah.
Mr. Fred Bloggs is that mask that you talk
That's
through.
it.
Yeah.
So then underneath we put for and on behalf of the Attorney General of the House of Bloggs. So that's in there because you are your own Attorney General. You make up your own law, and as long as you do no harm to anybody else, you can make up whatever law you want because only you abide by it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Attorney General. No, we'll cover that in when we're talking about the liens. So, and then we finally for and on behalf of Baron Fred of the House of Bloggs. So you've heard of the House of Rothschild and bankers. They still use all this nonsense. They know this. They still use it. So we've been told it's a surname. No, it's not. It's our house name. It's the House of Bloggs.
And isn't it owned by the Vatican?
Well, that's what they say. But unless you've seen actual evidence to prove that, who knows? With the affidavit, we only look for evidence.
Yeah.
We don't make claims. We don't say that's owned by the Vatican. This is this. This is this. We make claims and we ask questions. We say, you're making a claim. Please provide the evidence to back up your claim. Again, another maxim, he who makes a claim has the burden to provide the material evidence to back up that claim. So you're claiming there's a government, and this is what we're going to get into now in the lien process. So that's the affidavit in a nutshell, and we've really, sped through that because obviously we've been going an hour now. So going on now to what is a lien. So it's actually a security by way of a lien. So you've heard of securities in the financial world where they have bits of paper and they turn it into money. Well, if we weren't in a fraudulent system, the people who have got these securities by way of a lien should be able to take them and convert them into cash. But because it would bring the system down and they don't want us to benefit from their system, then it's not allowed. But basically, it's an agreement to a future debt. What you've got to remember here, there's no such thing as money. So when we talk about the charges that we're going to charge them, don't think about it as money. It's an agreement to the crimes of fraud, malfeasance in the office, and willful and belligerent acts of terrorism. It's a 6-letter process sent 7 days apart. And all we're doing is we're asking them to prove their claim that there is a government. Again, on Divergent Motivation, there's a good video of there talking about the lien process with Darren and Scott. It took me quite a while to get my head around this. And when I watched that video, it sort of brought everything together. So, a lien. Letters 1 to 3 lay out the facts. Letter 4 is the opportunity to resolve. Letter 5 is a notice of default. And letter 6 brings it all the previous letters together, and it's at that point that it becomes a lien. And the letter 6 is your affidavit of truth and statement of fact. So it only becomes a lien after letter 6. And these people know what liens are. So letters 1 to 3 lay out the facts. So I've just pulled out certain parts which I think are important that you need to get your head around, but obviously you do need to read the liens yourself. So It is a maxim, and a maxim is called a maxim, as they are maxims in fact. He who makes the claim carries the obligation to present the material evidence of the claim. The very existence of a state or company, which as a company is no different to McDonald's, and there is a position of Prime Minister or CEO of that company, which is no different to McDonald's, is the very evidence that there is a claim. The very existence of Mr. Rishi Sunak's email address is indisputable evidence in fact of that claim. He who makes a claim carries the formal and legal obligation to present the foundation in evidence of that claim. So we write it like this. It is therefore a noted obligation for Mr. Rishi Sunak to present the material evidence to support the claim in one of two forms. One, Mr. Rishi Sunak carries the formal obligation to present the material evidence that the circa 67.5 million people have formally signed and legally transferred their legal power of attorney, where the circa 67.5 million people can be legally represented by a government. So you will have heard of power of attorney. Mm-hmm. Some people get lasting power of attorney for their aged mums and dads, if they get into that will, point. Isn't it? Yeah. Well, no, it's not a will. It's the lasting power of attorney is so that if your mum or dad or somebody gets to the point where they can't, maybe they've got dementia, they can't make decisions for themselves. That legal power of attorney means you can deal with their estate for them while they're alive. You can make decisions on their behalf, right? So we're asking Rishi Sunak to provide the material evidence that we've signed the documents to give over our power of attorney. Or Mr. Rishi Sunak carries the formal obligation to present the material evidence that the circa 67.5 million people have formally signed a legal consent to be governed, which would be representative of a commercial agreement where there can be contractual legal obligations or liabilities under the acts and statutes and legislations in accordance with the formally agreed and legally signed agreement to the facts and with the legal and signed declaration of no contest to that legal effect. So just so you're aware, the words obligations and liabilities apparently only exist within a contract. So have we ever signed our power of attorney over to somebody representing the government? No, I haven't. Have I ever signed a contract which is the consent of the governed? If we've signed one of them, then it should be very easy for them to go to some storeroom somewhere and bring out all these signed documents that we've all signed, but they don't exist because we've never signed them. And an X on a piece of paper is not signing a contract. So then what we do is, it's like I say, I've only pulled out certain things. There's more reading around about these. But what we do is we then say, failure to present this legal obligated evidence, in fact, will enter Mr. Rishi Sunak into a lasting and legally binding agreement to the following effect. One, that there is a formal and lasting legal and binding agreement between Mr. Fred Bloggs and Mr. Rishi Sunak in the position of Member of Parliament for HM Parliament and Government Company State, that the claim that there is a legal and legitimate government is fraudulent in nature, which is fraud by misrepresentation, and carries a term of incarceration of 7 to 10 years, and the latter where there is multiple instances of, and is a chargeable criminal offence, and that there is a formal and lasting legal and binding agreement between Mr. Fred Bloggs and Mr. Rishi Sunak in the position of Member of Parliament for HM Parliament and Government Company State. Mr. Rishi Sunak has formally and legally agreed to stand for commercial charges to the same degree. Now, you can only charge somebody if it's a chargeable offence, and fraud, malfeasance in the office, and terrorism are chargeable offences.
Because that falls under common law, doesn't it? fraud.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it's under it. Yeah, because common law they do fraud. Yeah. So number 2, that there is a formal and lasting legal and binding agreement between Mr. Fred Bloggs and Mr. Rishi Sunak in the position of Member of Parliament, branch in Parliament, Government, etc. That the above formally agreed fraud by misrepresentation is also formal and criminal malfeasance in the office, which carries a term of incarceration of 25 years or life, which is also a chargeable criminal offence, and that there is a formal and lasting agreement, a legal and binding agreement between Mr. Fred Bloggs and Mr. Rishi Sunak in the position of Member of Parliament, has formally and legally agreed to stand for commercial charges to the same degree. And then number 3, the last one, that there is a formal and lasting legal and binding agreement between Mr. Fred Bloggs, Mr. Rishi Sunak, position of Member of Parliament, that the above and formally agreed fraud by misrepresentation and malfeasance in the office is a demonstrated and willful intention to cause distress and alarm, which is also a demonstrated willful and belligerent act of terrorism, and that there is a formal and lasting legal and binding agreement between Mr. Fred Bloggs and Rishi Sunak, that Mr. Rishi Sunak has formally and legally agreed to stand for commercial charges to the same degree. So you can see why the affidavit is a little bit of a read.
Yeah.
It has to be, because it's
Just
put legally. You know, that's why the names and the positions are mentioned so many times. It's so there's no obfuscation or no misunderstanding.
Yeah.
You know, it's all there. You are talking about Mr. Rishi Sunak in his, you know, as a Member of Parliament, etc. You are talking about yourself or Fred Bloggs. So, letter 1 to 3 then lays out the facts. So we send letter 1. We wait 7 days. We don't get a reply. So we then get letter 2, which is letter 1, but we add a paragraph at the beginning, which basically states, as of this date, there has been no legal response to our letter dated X, and therefore we give you a further 7 days, and we resend, you know, then we add the rest of letter 1. So we're giving him 14 days to come back on this. After the 14th day, again, there's no reply. So we send letter 2, but in paragraph 1, we just add a little bit. So this time we put, as of this date, there has been no legal response to our letter dated X or our letter dated Y, but we're going to give you a further 7 days. So we give him 21 days. After 21 days, there's no reply. We go on to letter 4, which is opportunity to resolve. Now, this is where we bring in charges. So, as it says here, as there is now an agreement, because after you've given them 21 days and they've completely ignored it, they've agreed to the facts in those letters. So, as there is now an agreement between the parties by way of lasting tacit agreement through acquiescence, as you have already agreed to the crime, then we elect to charge you under this agreement. As the crime was committed against us, then we reserve the right to choose the remedy for these crimes. Where there is a crime, then there is a requirement for a remedy, otherwise the crime goes unresolved. As we now have an obligation to bring this crime to resolution, we are therefore giving Mr. Rishi Sunak an opportunity to resolve. Number 1. For the formally agreed criminal offence of fraud by misrepresentation, where the claim being made by Mr. Rishi Sunak, claimant, that there is a government is fraudulent in nature, which is also willful and premeditated fraud by misrepresentation, where this is an agreed chargeable criminal offence, then we elect to formally charge Mr. Rishi Sunak, claimant, acting in the capacity of Member of Parliament, branch in Parliament and Government, Company State, £5 million. And then we put it in figures. Then, number 2, we go through the same again. For the formal agreed criminal offence of malfeasance in the office, where Mr. Rishi Sunak, claimant, acting in capacity of Member of Parliament, has agreed to the criminal offence of malfeasance in the office, it's agreed chargeable criminal offence, then we elect to formally charge Mr. Rishi Sunak, again, £5 million. And then the third one, which is just a very similar wording, this time it's for acts, willful and belligerent acts of terrorism. Again, we elect to charge £5 million. That's a total of 15 million. And don't forget, there's no such thing as money. It's all, confidence, faith, and belief. This isn't why we're doing it. We're doing it because who has ever got any paperwork from the government and MPs agreeing to the fact that they're committing fraud, malfeasance in the office, and willful and belligerent acts of terrorism? Nobody, until Baron David Ward started taking out the liens. And now we have, well, with the amount of liens I now see getting put into the public domain on the Facebook groups, there must be into the thousands. And it's not just our country. This is around the world.
Anybody actually received money by doing this?
Not that I'm aware of, but like I said, this isn't what we're after. We're not.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we're not after the money. Like I say, I did hear at one point, but I haven't heard anything since, that somebody was looking into a way of monetizing it. Whether they got anywhere, I've no idea.
Well, I know of somebody who's been advising me, who shall remain nameless, but he's now at a point, because I want to get him on the podcast, but he's finalizing. I think it's with like the high courts, but they're at a point of wanting to make a deal because they know that they've got nowhere to go with it. And
Right.
so, yeah, I watch this space maybe.
One of the things that I did hear from somebody who actually knew David Ward, his intention, what I heard, was that because he's got, I don't know, it's about £2 billion worth. I might be wrong there, but I think it's got well over £1 billion worth of liens. He wanted, if he could have monetized them, he was just going to have houses built, and home the homeless.
Mm.
So after that, then you ignore that. You come to letter file, which is notice of default. So basically, this is a notice of default. So this is a notice to you that you are now in default of your obligations under the above written legal agreement by acquiescence as a result of your failure to make remedy by way of commercial instrument, blah, blah, blah. And then we give them a further 7 days to pay up, which they're not going to do. But then we'll just come back to this, because as I've said, letters 1 and 3 make up Appendix A in the lien. Letter 4 is Appendix B, and letter 5 is Appendix B. And then letter 6, so this is where we're bringing the whole lien together. And letter 6 actually comes right to the top of the lien. So letter 6 is the affidavit, your affidavit, to the truth that's all the exhibits, that this is the process you have gone through. And so letter 6 is like a summary of everything else. So like I showed you for David's affidavit, the first 4 are, I, Baron Fred of the House of Blocks, the undersigned solemnly swear and declare and depose I'm competent in this matter, because you're the one that's done all the lien. You're the only one that's competent to say it's all true and everything. And an affidavit is sworn under the penalty of perjury. So as long as you put all those letters right, you've sent them all, you've got proof you've sent them. Obviously, an affidavit has to have affidavit of truth and statement of fact on it. We also do a lien number. People can choose whatever lien numbers they do. I just copied what Baron David Ward started to do, and a lot of others. So HOB would stand for House of Blogs. So if you were called Smith, it'd be HOS. And then the MP you're writing to,
I'd be Sob.
It would be Rishi Sunak -lien -001. And then if at some point you want to take a second one out, it would be 002, 003, etc. And so then you send that, and this is all done via email. We do this all via email.
Yeah.
But once you've sent letter 6 via email, you also send an email to a number of news outlets that are supposed to put out public notices and you make it public. We also upload them on some of the Facebook groups and onto the BDW Facts website, where they're up there for public scrutiny. And then we print out the completed affidavit. But we also add Baron David Ward's affidavit at the end. So a lien is bookended by two affidavits. It starts with your affidavit of truth and statement of fact, then all the evidence, and then at the end of it, Baron David Ward's affidavit is added, because that's where it all comes from.
So it's almost like a conclusion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how good it's on but this is a completed lien of mine. You can see, can't see very well, but you can see it's quite a long document.
How many pages is that?
I'll tell you, where are we? Oh, well, there's 65 pages of Baron David Ward's affidavit at the end, and the actual lien, wait a minute, is, when I find it, yeah. So there's 38 pages in the actual lien, plus 65. So just over 100 pages.
Blimey.
Now I've got 31 completed, perfected liens on MPs. So if you could ever turn that into money, be all right.
So where are you with regards to paying things like your council tax and all these other things?
At the moment, my circumstances unfortunately don't allow me to do that.
Okay.
But I'm working on, and as well, I'm not actually ready, because the next step after the MP liens are the liens where you are attacked. So when you are sent a demand for money, whether it be a PCN, whether it be a speeding charge, whether it be a electric bill or a gas bill or anything, the liens for that are a lot more complicated than the liens for the MPs. The liens for the MPs are fairly simple. So once you get your head around it, because it's basically the same lien. And I basically have a mail merge using Word and Excel. So I just put the details in for the MP, press a button, and it churns it out for me. And then I just have to pull the relevant bits out and send it with the emails. It's quite more in depth is the next stage, which I haven't got to yet. I've got to even start looking at that properly. I've had a little look, but basically, you look at, very basically, you look at a demand for money. So I've just got one here. I'm not going to show it because it's I downloaded it from somebody, but basically they're making claims. So if you get this is from Marston Recovery, and they're making a number of claims. So you have to learn to read it. And first of all, they're claiming first-hand knowledge. So how can Marston's Recovery Agency have first-hand knowledge of any debt you might have if you didn't take that debt out with them?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's fraudulent to start with, that they've got first-hand knowledge. Then they're making a claim here that it says, you have been sent this notice of enforcement because you have not paid money that you owe. So they're making a claim that you have not paid money that you owe. Well, you've got to prove that claim. You know, he who makes a claim has the obligation to provide the material evidence of that claim. So first of all, where's your claim that you have first-hand knowledge? Where's your evidence that I have not paid money that I owe? Where's your evidence that I owe any money?
It's basically like McDonald's coming to your house, knocking on your door and say, you owe me 50 quid, pay it.
Exactly. Yeah, you wouldn't do it, would you? Then there's a third claim here. It says, who you owe money to. And this one says, Torbay Council. So they're making a claim that you owe money to Torbay Council. Well, prove that. And 4, there's a reference number. They're making a claim that there's a reference or an account number. Well, prove it. 5, the amount owing. Whatever it is, I'll just make a figure up, 200 quid. Well, where's your proof that I owe 200 quid? If you can't prove it, I don't have to pay it. And then claim 6, if you don't pay, then they'll be taking these actions. Again, they're making a claim that they're going to take actions. And then the final thing is, it's not signed. No living man or woman has signed it in wet ink. Therefore, they're making a claim that the Companies Act, Section 44, doesn't apply to them. But it does. Where's your evidence that the Company Act doesn't apply to you? It does apply to you. So on this one, there's 7 claims. So then you have to go through, like we went through that affidavit there. So that was just, we had 3 things: malfeasance, fraud, malfeasance in the office, and willful and belligerent acts of terrorism. So then you have to plug all these claims into those letters, and then the additional bit, so that you now agree to this. So we're going to charge you for the. So it's quite a bit more complicated. I think once you get your head around it, it's probably not too bad, but it is quite a bit complicated.
I'm getting there.
But the thing is, I know people who have used this and they've got out of, they just got stuff dismissed. In fact, just this morning I was reading in one of the groups, somebody had just put a thing saying, for all them that say this don't work, it does. I've just used the affidavit and I haven't even got to the end, the lien, sorry. And I think he said he hadn't even got to the end of it, and they've written to me and said, okay, that's it, we're forgetting about it. And the other thing is, it's a few months back now, the people who do the affidavit and the lien process don't actually go to court. But I did read a comment where one guy, he wanted to try it out, and he did go to court, apparently, took the affidavit with him, and basically he said they all ran for the hills. He said, I threatened the judge, I told him to shut up, I threatened him, I'm going to do him for fraud, I threatened the CPS and the barrister that was, attacking me. He said, and basically they all just ran for the hills, and that were it, case closed. But that's not something we normally do. That's the first and only one I've ever heard say.
Yeah, I mean, normally you would want to avoid the courts because you're then in their playground, aren't you?
Well, you see, this affidavit, this lien, this is the court of record. This is the record. It's all recorded. You go into their courts, they don't keep a record. It's all in their private bar guild, and it's all secret. And unless you rebut, unless you challenge those 12 presumptions of law, you're guilty the second you walk in. Yeah. So
what's your opinion on the black belt barrister? Because he's a barrister, so therefore surely he must have swore an oath to the bar guild as well.
If he's a true barrister, which I don't see any reason why not to believe that. As far as I know, anybody working in that industry has to swear an oath to the private bar guild. All I can tell you is I've put a few comments on some of his things and never looked back. But about a month ago, maybe a bit longer, he did a video, something, it was about something to do with a car and something to do with police and Traffic Management Act. Yeah. And so I just put a comment and said, I can't remember how I worded it now, but I said something, so are you saying acts and statutes apply to us? Now, I don't know whether it was him or somebody else, because it was a funny name that came up and said, well, yeah, acts and statutes apply to everybody. So I said, are you making the claim that acts and statutes apply to everybody then? Well, yeah, they do. So then I put another comment explaining about the Baron David Ward affidavit. And next time I looked, it had gone, disappeared. So I thought, So I put another one saying, why have you wiped out my, my comment mentioning the Baron David Ward? And I wrote it all again. I looked the next day, gone.
It's funny because I was looking through my list of subscribers, and the Black Belt Secrets was on there, which is his lesser channel.
Right.
Still got like over 100,000 subscribers. But I thought that was quite funny. But with various videos that I've done, like the poor farmer Danny who had his land stolen.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
You know, the amount of people saying, "Oh, get in contact with the Black Belt barrister," or he's been
absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I was like, you're wasting your time.
Now,
wasting your time.
For me, I didn't wake up until 2021, partway through the first lockdown. And I had loads of questions, and I started to research. And I originally, like a lot of people, went down the common law route and learning about the fraud and the deception of the legal system. So I went down the common law route originally, and I because people were crying out for it by 2021. September of 2021, knocking on 2021, people were crying out for information about common law. So by then I'd done certainly hundreds, if not over 1,000 hours of research. So I booked a room for 2 evenings, told it had hold 100 people, and I did a talk entitled "Common Law: An Introduction and the Wider Picture." And the first one, I think there were 97 people there. A fortnight later, there were only 75, but that was when, if you remember that year, that week, they'd done petrol and diesel shortage. So at the last minute, I had a few cancelling. They didn't have enough fuel to get to the talk and go to work all week. But both talks were very well received. People were so grateful that somebody were telling them something. And then I carried on my research. And in beginning of 2022, after a few people had seen me and said, "Oh, you're going to do some more talks," I booked the room again in March. I did 2 talks. The first one was an updated version of the original talk with some new information. And the second one, I called it a follow-on talk, where I talked about people and groups that were trying to, get themselves out of the system and fight the system. So like Jez and his lawful rebellion, that guy Peter with his lawful notice and demand, allegedly Dave, the Good, or Good Nation, as some people call it. And the last thing I mentioned was the Baron David Ward Affidavit, because I'd only just recently read it for the first time. And I remember saying that I've just recently read this. It sounds very good, but I need to do more research. And it's just gone from there. And now I believe, my belief, that the affidavit is the way to go, because basically, unless you have signed a contract, nothing applies to you, not even common law. Did we ever sign a contract to be bound by common law? No, we never signed a contract to be governed.
Yeah, I thought common law was just God's law. So that's kind of
the thing is,
do not hurt anybody. It's your basic decent morals.
If you look at what they say for common law, do no harm, cause no loss, cause no breach of the peace, and do no fraud. So if you look at those, causing fraud is actually causing harm. A breach of the peace is causing harm. Causing loss is causing harm. So you can sum that up as one thing: cause no harm. As long as you cause no harm to anybody else intentionally, and if you do it by accident, you put that right, that's all we need. That's all we need. Just decent people. But the thing is, we've been totally educated and manipulated into being a selfish,
brainwashed,
greedy society. And I'm nearly 70, and I saw a massive step change when Margaret Thatcher was in power. I saw us going from a reasonable sort of thing to, we had a massive step change there to really being greedy and selfish, because to me, there's nobody more greedy and selfish than Margaret Thatcher. And I think from then on, we've been going downhill for a lot longer than that, but from then on, to me, we've really shot downhill. Yeah. People say, well, why do you want a government? People will be doing all sorts. But, well, maybe, but,
we want anarchy, but anarchy isn't what people will think anarchy is. People will associate anarchy with, and it isn't, is it?
No, it's not. No,
it's about
again,
living your own life.
It's just more deception, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, people say, "Oh, well, how will we get this, that, and the other?" Well, we'll find a way, because that's what we do. You know, it's get away from all these corporations.
But like I said, you know, going back, I don't know, 100 years ago, we had police, we had roads, we had all of this, but we didn't have to pay for it all like we do now.
Exactly.
So how did we manage it then? So when people say, "Oh, we've got to pay taxes so we could get the roads," well, no, because we never used to, and the roads were much better than what they are now.
Exactly.
So
it's like, as David says in his affidavit, that the tax all goes down the big black hole. Well, we know where it goes, don't we? Because why is there so many billionaires? And haven't we even got a multi-billionaire now or more? You know, so we know where the money's going.
No, absolutely. Well, listen, I think that's a good place to call it a day. I've really enjoyed your slideshow, your presentation, I suppose I should say. Please, continue to spread the knowledge, because knowledge is power, and my goodness, do we need it at the moment.
It is. I'm booked again for the I think it's Monday the 8th of April. Got a couple of hours drive to get there and back, but you know, if I can spread the word, I'm going to spread the word.
Brilliant.
We'll find out now, won't we, if I start getting pulled over and things. If
well, yeah, it'll be the same with me as well, going through the DVLA
so
stuff.
I'll tell you what I'll do. If I now all of a sudden find I'm the interest of certain people, maybe in uniform, and start getting a bit of harassment, I'll have me back on, and so I can share it.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. Yeah.
We'll just see, won't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope everyone else has enjoyed it who's going to be watching this. I certainly have. And until next time, take care of yourselves and speak to you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye.